guys, it's Robin, RsIslandCrafts, and welcome to my craft room. Today, I'm going to show you how to make a cart cuff. What's a cart cuff? Well, a cart cuff, similar to the cuff that I wear on my wrist, is a cover that goes over the handle of a shopping cart. So this is a shopping cart handle cover, but come on, cart cuff sounds cooler and it's much easier to say, right? Many of us are now going into phase 1 during this pandemic, and some of us are already gone through that phase. But there's people that are going out for the very first time to go grocery shopping. They have been either having it delivered into their house or someone else has been bringing it for them. And it could be a little nerve-wracking after not going shopping for 8 to 10 weeks and now having to go out into the world. You might get a little nervous. Places like Costco and such are having you wear masks and everything when you go out. So you might worry about the safety of the shopping carts. Now, I have been shopping. I have needed to go out and do my own shopping since the pandemic started. Even though I kept it very minimum, I still had to go to the store. And I noticed that more recently now than in the beginning, there are attendants that are outside at the shopping carts and they're going and they're wiping them all down as the carts are coming through and stuff. And that's great. They're sanitizing them and everything. But I still get a little worried. Are they hitting all the spots? I like to sanitize the handles myself. I always have, even before we had any of these issues. Cold and flu season gets pretty bad down here in Florida, like I'm sure it does everywhere else, and I always make sure that I wipe down my cart handles all the time with the little sanitizing wipes they have. I also like to wipe down all the edges of my cart. Now, while I'm sure that they're doing a wonderful job wiping down the carts, I'd like that extra bit of protection to know that I have protected myself and I've done something to take care of myself. So I made this cart cover for the handle of the shopping cart. Now, most shopping carts are about 19.5 inches wide. Now, this is going to cover the majority of the handle of the shopping cart. This, of course, it will be shorter. This will work for your majority of your Walmart shopping carts, for your average size ones. Now, of course, if you go to Sam's and Costco's and you get the double wide, this won't go from end to end. But at the same time, you can still just hold it right here in the center. You don't have to put your hands on the ends where the bare metal is. Now, even after this pandemic is gone, it'll also be good to use these handles to cover the cart. Like if you got small children out, you know they're always putting their hands on it and they're always trying to chew on it for some strange reason. So you can still use it then. You can use it for your own safety and security, even past the pandemic, so when the flu season comes around again. Plus, we don't have this problem as much in Florida, but when you're up north and it's very cold, the shopping cart handle, I would imagine, it gets quite cold also. This is something nice to put on there to have a little barrier against the cold of the shopping cart, right? This is very simple. I've used just 2 pieces of fabric. I am using batting on the inside of mine. You could just use 2 pieces of fabric and skip the batting, but I like that extra cushion, and I also like that extra barrier and protection because, okay, 2 pieces of fabric, what if over time something is on there? What if someone sneezed on it and it's wet and it goes through those 2 pieces of fabric? When I have that batting in there, it's going to give that extra barrier against anything that might be on there. I'm also using a little hook and loop or Velcro to hold mine on. You could use snaps instead if you'd like, but I just chose to use 1 full length of Velcro. If your Velcro isn't long enough to go all the way to the end, you can just go ahead and cut a couple little pieces, maybe 3 or 4 pieces, and pop it on there, and it's going to work fine. With this whole piece like this is a little bit extra protection for if you have children with you to stop them from peeling that off. Because you know when you turn your head for 3 seconds to go and grab that head of lettuce, your kid is going to try to rip this right off. You could put snaps on it, and that would help deter the children. You might want to put extra snaps on, maybe 10 of them on there. You could go a little bit less. Just divide it all up and see what feels comfortable for you. If you don't have any type of batting in your house, you can put anything in between here. You can put some flannel, some fleece. You can put an old hand towel from doing the kitchen dishes and such. You can use stabilizer and just go ahead and interface or stabilize both pieces, but once again, I like that extra little bit of squish. So let's get ahead and stop chatting and let's start making this. For my Velcro, I just happen to have this big roll of Velcro. It is 5/8 inches. I would suggest not going down too small. I wouldn't go down to, I don't know how small Velcro gets, but I would definitely try to stay at least a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch. If you only have an inch, you can go ahead, but it's going to take a little bit of effort to get that off. And you could also go ahead and trim your inch down in half. You can go ahead and just mark a line down the halfway point with a ruler and then just trim it up with your scissors or rotary cutter. A 1/4 inch is going to work, but with that 1/4 inch, it's going to hold it on, yes, but it's not going to be very secure if you have small children. So if it's just for you and your husband or your mother or your grandmother or something, then I wouldn't worry about it too much. Using the 5/8, it allowed me to have enough room, so when I went ahead and I rolled this around, it was easy for me to just plop it on there, and I had a really good chance on hitting it and not getting it all kinds of wonky and crooked. You're going to need about 19 inches, but I wouldn't cut this until we get to a certain point, and I'll show you where, because if you cut it too short or too long is never a problem, of course, but we don't want to waste any of our Velcro. So we're going to go ahead and cut this after we get everything sewn together and flipped around so that we know that we're cutting it to the exact right length that we need. Now I'm choosing to use 2 different fun novelty print cotton fabrics. I have some cows here and a little bit of farm life, and I'm using cotton batting, but as I said, you can use anything you want in the center and any type of batting. So if you just have some polyester or some wool or bamboo or whatever, go ahead and use that. It's a great use of your scraps. For your outer fabrics, if you don't have any cotton fabrics, you can go ahead and use t-shirt material. You can use fleece or flannel, anything you have that you can use as a material that can easily be washed. Because every time you use this as you go out shopping, you're going to want to bring it home and pop it into the washer and dryer to make sure it's clean and safe and ready to go for the next time. We don't want any of those little germs hanging around at the house. And these, all 3 of them are cut the same. I cut them 6 inches wide and 20 inches in length. What I want to do is I want to take these and place them right side together. I'm going to match them all up nice and neat. And then I'm going to take my batting and I'm going to put it right on top. Try to get that lined up just a little bit better. I'm not worried about right side or wrong side with my batting. It's all going to be the same. It's just inside our little cart cuff, so it's not going to matter too much. So I have this all lined up. I'm going to put a few pins in it. You can put clips around the edge if you want, but then as you're sewing, you're going to have to go ahead and remove those clips. If I just pop a few pins in it, then they can stay there until I'm all done sewing. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance around the outside. If you feel a little bit more comfortable, I gave you a little bit of wiggle room here, that if you want, you can go ahead and do a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now, before we get sewing, let's just have a little chat about shopping cart handles. Now, like I said, I base this off of the one that we have at our local Walmart here. If you're in another country, I don't know the size of your shopping carts, and I don't know what your handles look like. So before you make this, you can go ahead and pop into your store and just measure the length of your handle from the bar to the bar. Write that measurement down, and then you want to measure around the actual handle itself and get that measurement. And then I would go ahead and I would, depending on your seam allowance, you would have to add a little to your length and then to your width. The length isn't too big of a deal, so if it comes a little bit short on the end, then you're going to be okay because you're not going to really put your fingers all the way at the end there. So if you want, you can just add a 1/2 inch to that length you found, and that'll give you that extra space when you turn everything inside out if you use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, when you go around this way, I would add an inch to it, to 1.5 inches, because remember, we are going to be overlapping it with our Velcro. Now, it's not going to matter if this is a little bit too loose on your handle, but it's going to be a problem if it's too tight and you can't get it on. So you can even go up to 2 inches, and that way you know you've got plenty for your overhang when you're flipping it over. You've got your seam allowance and everything like that. I'm going to leave my turning on the side here. You can leave it all the way at the end, but remember, you're going to have to put your hand all the way in and pull it all the way out. If I leave it on the side, then I only have to pull out half, and I pull out half, and I won't have that whole big bunch that I'm trying to pull through. So my 1/4 inch seam allowance at a 2.0 stitch length. And I'm going to stitch all the way around. I'm going to leave an opening of about 1.5 inches. You can go all the way up to 3 inches if you want, just to get your hand in there to turn everything around and flip it. I do back stitch right here at the beginning, just to give a little extra security, so when I'm in there and I'm trying to pull the fabric out, I'm not going to tear those stitches. Now, if you're worried about any of your layers shifting while you're stitching this, you can go ahead and use a walking foot. That'll allow all of the layers to just go ahead and feed evenly, and you won't have to worry about much shifting at all. I always like to trim my corners about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch away from the seam line. That's going to reduce some of that extra bulk so that we can have some nice looking corners and they won't get all rounded and funky looking. You just want to make sure that you don't trim all the way up to where your stitches are. Now, if you did use your 3/8 inch seam allowance, you can go ahead and trim it down to about 1/4 of an inch. That way you don't have too much bulk in your seams when we flip it around, because we are going to be sewing Velcro down on this and we don't want to worry about having an extra heavy seam there in our seam allowance. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put our hand in between the two cotton fabrics that are right sides together. If we go between our blue fabric here and our batting, when we turn it, we're going to have the batting and the outside of this fabric as the outside of our cart cuff, and that's not going to work. So we want to make sure we go through our two right sides together pieces of cotton. You should be able to put your fingers in there, if not your whole hand, and just pull it out. If you have any struggle, you can go ahead and use some hemostats to pull it out. You just want to be careful that you're not going to do any damage to your hole here. You don't want to tear your seams or rip your fabric because you're just pulling it so tough. I'm just using a plastic crochet hook. Anything that has a dull end to it, you can use it to go ahead and push out your corners. You can just use your finger if you want, that works too. You want to do the best job you can, but if you're not getting exact perfect corners, it's okay. You can use the tip of your seam ripper to just kind of like pry it out just a little bit, but you got to be careful because it's really easy to tear the fabric when you're doing that. Just going to go through and give a little bit of a kind of roll it with my fingers to make sure that the front stays on the front and the back stays on the back. It really does become interchangeable. I have it set up that this striped fabric is the outside, so it would go like this, but you could easily, because the way we put the Velcro on, turn it around and you would have it to be reversible. I'm going to take this over to my pressing station and I'm just going to go ahead and press all of these edges so that they lay nice and flat. And when I come over to the hole here, I'm just going to go ahead and tuck my seams in and make sure I line it up the best to my ability so that everything looks nice. I don't want to have it so that it comes down too far on either side. Give it a nice press. If you want, you can put a couple clips on here to hold it in place. Now you have two options. You can go ahead and lay your Velcro down and you can stitch all the way around and top stitch it while you're putting your Velcro on, but I like to put my Velcro a little bit away from the edge. I prefer to top stitch around it and then put my Velcro on, and then I could line my Velcro up right along that top stitching edge so it's not any of that roughness hanging over the edge. So if it does happen to spin on the handle, if the kids are playing with it or something, they're not going to have that rough edge touching them. I'm going to start just before my hole, and I'm going to stick with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, well, top stitching, and I'm going to stick with my 2.0. You can use a matching thread, a contrasting thread. You can do fancy stitches, anything you wish. Your main point is to get this little hole that we have, our turning holes, closed up. And then if we go ahead and top stitch all the way around it, when we wash it in the washing machine, it's going to hold this shape and it's not going to get all kind of wonky along the edges. And then I just back stitch a little bit at the end. Now we can go ahead and measure our Velcro or hook and loop tape, depending on what you're using. Now I'm going to go from where my stitch line is here, where I top stitch. So I'm going to go just inside this end, and I'm going to lay it out all the way to just inside this end. You can go ahead and put a little clip on it to hold it in place if you want. Most times you're cutting both pieces at the same time. If you're not, you can cut them one at a time. Then just lay it out flat. And then trim the end. You can find things of Velcro like this at Walmart or on Amazon. And you can pick up Velcro just about anywhere. I know Michael's has their own type of brand. And you can also use your discount coupons at Joann's and Michael's, so you take advantage of that. Now we're only going to be putting down one at a time. I'm going to go ahead and use some clips just to hold this on. Pinning through Velcro is not always the easiest. This is actually a soft Velcro that is meant for making baby items and such, but I think it's going to work fine for the way we're going to use this. I think it's going to hold everything just nice. It's not like it's got to hold anything up and keep it from falling apart, right? It's just got to stay on the shopping cart while I'm shopping. The real trick to this is to remember to take it off the shopping cart when you leave the building. And if you find that you do have a little extra at the end, you can just go ahead and trim it off. Which means we'll probably have to trim our other piece too when we get to it. Now I'm just going to start close to the end, just personal preference. You can start anywhere you want. And I'm going to stitch about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch along the edge. Now this is the soft part, so it's no big deal. When you get to the hook part up here, it has this little border around it, so you want to be stitching right into that border there. It's very difficult to stitch through all of these hooks. Your thread is going to end up going like this instead of being down flat. But when you're holding it, you'll be able to tell right away. So you just kind of want to stick in that 1/8 of an inch area and just stitch right along all of these little prickly hooks along here. And we're going to stitch around the entire length. Now, if you were doing this in pieces, then of course you would have to stitch each piece individually. Just go ahead and you can either eyeball it or measure it out so that they're all separated nice and evenly. And remember, when you do it in little pieces, you're going to have to match it when we do the other side. When I do one long strip, I can easily just put the other strip on and it's going to match automatically. You want to try to stitch as best as you can in a straight line, because remember, your stitching is going to show on the other side here. Now the whole point of this soft Velcro is that these edges and these corners are really soft. This part that it's the tape that it's put onto is not all that rough, but if yours is really hard, you can always go ahead and curve and turn, just cut a little corners off here and just curve it a little, so you don't have to worry about that. But it's going to be underneath on the cart. It's not going to be at the bottom of the handle. You're not going to really run into it on the ends and stuff. So now we have to decide where we're going to put our other piece. Let me just measure, since I trimmed off a little of it before, to make sure. Okay, so now our next piece, we can't just put it here, because then you're going to have this weird part hanging off the bottom. So we want to bring this over and we want to overlap it. So we want to make sure that our piece is going there. Now, of course, I've decided that my yellow is going to be on the outside. So I'm going to want to put my Velcro on here on the opposite side of my blue so that when I bring it over, you can go ahead and test it out before you sew it to make sure it's going to be on there right. So if I lay it down face down from the piece that I already put, this is where my Velcro is. I can see where it's stitched on. I want to put it on this side. Okay? We're going to do the same thing. We're just going to put this down and line it up along our little top stitching line. You can just put 2 clips on if you want. Now we're going to do the same thing. Now remember, we're going to try to stitch along that taped edge. If yours is anything like mine, one side's wider than the other, just do the best you can. You just want to make sure it's nice and secure and along the edge there. There you go, all set. Now this one I did the straight line. This one I did a little bit of a zigzag stitch. I'm not sure if you can see that, but I put a really tight, narrow zigzag stitch on. So if you prefer to use a zigzag or you want to go ahead and use a straight stitch, either way is going to work. Go ahead and test it out. There you go. You got your cart cuff all set to go. Now what I like to do, I fold it in half, and I fold this end up, and I fold this end up, and mostly because of the fact you have all that Velcro in there and you have the batting. And then I like to go ahead and just store this in a little Ziploc baggie. This is a sandwich size. Now I can go ahead and keep this in my car or keep it in my purse and it'll be all set to go. And when I take it off of the shopping cart when I'm done shopping, I can go ahead and fold it up and put it back into this little baggie. And this can go right out to the laundry room. So when you're ready to do your laundry, you can pop it in and get it washed. So you're not having to handle it any more than you have to once it's come off your shopping cart. Thank you for joining me today and working on our cart cuffs. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments. Now, when you go out shopping, you can feel a little bit safer knowing that you have a cover to put on your shopping cart handles and your hands aren't going right onto it. Even if you're wearing gloves to take food off the shelves and stuff like that, it's still nice to have these on your shopping cart. Okay, everyone, you go out there and be safe when you're shopping, and I'll see you next time. Bye. My daughter and I took out the cart cuff for a little trial. This is a Sam's shopping cart. As you can see, it's a double occupancy for the kids. So it is a little bit shorter, but there's still plenty of room for you to put your hands on. But look at how easy it is to just peel that off with just a couple fingers. You don't have to touch it very much. It goes on nice and super simple and easy. It's a very windy day. Here's a nice little slow motion. Just grab the corner and it can just peel right up and you don't have to touch the whole thing. So it's great if you have gloves on or not. Then you can just fold it over onto itself and put it in your little Ziploc baggie.